Greetings, good people. It's your brother teacher, Ajamu Minka Kafele, meaning my fight for justice in the name and will of Allah. God is worth dying for. I am back again with Brother Teacher Speaks. Another informative and uplifting presentation for you. It's been a long time. It took me 6 months to get this one done, and hopefully the next one won't be as long. That's never the intent. But let me jump right into it. A lot to cover today and address this here on Columbus Day. This all came together on Columbus Day. So we're going to be obviously talking about Columbus. We're going to be talking about the prophecy in connection to Columbus that a lot of people are not aware of, and the history in regards to that. We're going to be talking about the Bible, and I know there's people out there who, you're talking about the Bible and it's full of lies and deceit and wickedness and all of that, and that's absolutely, there's truth in that, but there's also truth in the Bible, and thanks to Elijah Muhammad, we've been able to discern a lot of that, but also more importantly, you have to understand that wickedness has to mix truth with falsehood in order to lure you in. And so I'm laying all this pre-foundation before I get into things so I can smoothly flow, just so you can understand where we are. So as we move through here, get ready to get a perspective on Christopher Columbus that you've never seen. Okay. And a perspective on history and connection to Revelation prophecy, a section of it that you've never heard. All right. And it's all backed by actual facts, as we're going to show you. So let's rock and roll, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know how long it's going to take, but as Khalid Muhammad say, I promise not to be long, but I promise to be strong. Why Columbus Day is love, history meets prophecy, Christopher Columbus and the prophetic battle of evil versus good, Satan versus God. So as I was preparing this and as it all came together, I happened to run across this article for this year's Columbus Day that was in the New York Post, dated October 12, 2019. And the title of it is Columbus Day Haters Are Missing the Entire Point of the Holiday. Can you imagine that? And he goes on in this article and he talks about the arrival of Columbus in America kicked off an era of rapid technological advancement and cultural ferment. Really? I think that kind of started with the enslavement of people, black people, and all of the advancement that they brought, right? Okay. But he goes on in a very important part in here. He said that is true. He says celebrating Columbus Day is not a salute to conquest. Columbus is simply a handy symbol for all of the energy Italians and other Europeans brought to America. Columbus is a handy symbol, and we're going to really pinpoint and show you that today and why Columbus Day is loved by most of white America. He goes on and states in here, Columbus paved the way for the world's first modern democracy, the one we live in today. In other words, he's saying that this great, glorious, great America that we love is a result of Columbus, and therefore he should be celebrated, even with all that happened. And in the article, he talked about some of what he described as sacrifices of children by the Native Americans, and basically is stating that however bad Columbus was, some of the Native Americans were bad too. So that is all just equal wash, and let's just celebrate Columbus Day because that's the real point that should be recognized with all of this the paving of way of democracy. But let's really identify who Columbus is and his connection to prophecy. And so there's 3 phases that are going to be addressed in this, ladies and gentlemen. History meets prophecy. Phase 1, Satan, devil, man, prevented from global expansion for 1,000 years. So we're talking about Revelations 20. We're going to go through several of the verses in Revelations 20 to show you our point. There are 3 phases that I'll be covering in this section to show you the truism that exists, why Columbus is loved, and where we're going in the future. So Revelation 20 starts out by talking about Satan is bound for 1,000 years. Then I saw an angel coming down from heaven, having the key to the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. He laid hold of the dragon, that serpent of old, who is devil and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years. Now, first of all, let's identify, we're saying him. We're not talking about a mystery spook. This is why I say Satan, devil, man, so that you can get out of the spookism of it. And we're talking about the presence of a spirit of wickedness and unrighteousness that is in man. We're talking about Satan in a human form. And he cast him into the bottomless pit, shut him up, and set a seal on him so that he should deceive the nations no more till the 1,000 years were finished. But after these things, he must be released for a while. So he got sealed up because and he could not deceive anymore. So it means there was deception before he sealed him up, right? All right. So Revelations 21-3, Satan is bound. What does that mean? He's limited, bound for a purpose so that he could deceive the nations. He could not consolidate all nations under one world government. This limitation lasts 1,000 years. So in order to understand that prophecy is actually an event that occurred in history, we've got to identify the time in which that happened. Well, we got to look at the fall of Rome. Christianity, Catholicism being bound for 1,000 years. They say the fall of Rome took place from 476 to essentially 1492, the 1400s. Certainly 1492 is the pinnacle point. So the fall of Rome, in what they documented, started with the Germanic barbarians coming in and conquering the Western Roman Empire. So that's the beginning of the established date of the official fall of the Roman Empire beginning to take place. But it talked about before that they were involved in deception. But so you have to understand that the Roman Empire was also in ancient Egypt, down in Egypt, down into Africa, right? It was down in there, and they were changing the old Maionic teachings, the old ancient teachings, to this new pagan ways, right? That's what they were doing. So after 476 AD, Western Europe, medieval kingdoms, decentralized governments, lack of trade, decline in cities, strong institutional church, Pope as the most powerful man in Europe. They called it the Dark Ages. Okay? It's also interesting that they call it medieval, and medieval stands for middle. And I'm going to identify 3 phases here because the middle phase is when they're actually bound up. Right? So medieval period, the Dark Ages, right? Very interesting. But also it talks about, I saw an angel coming down from heaven that sealed them up. Well, they got sealed up in Europe. They got ran out of Africa with the Moors, which are black, which means black. Okay. So it's always interesting when some of the Moorish brothers are like, well, I would be called Moor, not black. Well, Moor means black. Okay. And Moors were Muslims. So we're talking about black men who were Muslims. Muslim in Islam, that means submission to the will of God. We're not talking about the Aryan, Persian, Islamic practices. We're talking about true Islam, and the teachings of Islam that you have today is different from the teachings of Prophet Muhammad. All right. So I just need to make that distinction because there's a lot of confusion about Islam. And there's a belief that Islam started in 700 in the 7th century. That's not true either, but that's a discussion for another time. The point is here that there was an angel coming down from heaven, but many of people would say, well, the Moors came up from Africa. No, they did not. No, that's a misconception. Remember, there's lies and deception that take place after he goes out into the world, global deception. And so the original world maps, ladies and gentlemen, are south side up. The Nile River is a reminder to us of the true projection of the world or the map, because the Nile River flows from what we call the south to the north. All the other ones are flowing north to south. But the original people in Africa, that water was flowing from south to north. So the original maps were south side up. And so when it says, I saw an angel coming down from heaven that sealed them up, well, it was the Moors who did that, right? It was the Moors. They were the angel coming down from heaven. Well, we know that the heaven on earth has always been in Africa. They've always loved Egypt. Africa got all the resources, etc., etc. It's the place to be. It was the Moors. It was those black men coming from heaven. They sealed them up in Europe. All right, as we'll talk about. And so they brought civilization there. Now they were suffering. You got to understand these so-called, as they call it, the dark ages. They're suffering. They're catching hell. They don't have no trade. They can't get out. There's famine. People can't read and write. Majority of the population, even kings and queens, were illiterate. And then to cap it all off near the end, they suffered they suffered a black plague, which nearly, they say, a third to close to a half of the European population died. 20 to 30 million or more people, tens of millions of people died from a disease that just came out of nowhere. You know, they weren't, to our knowledge, they weren't manufacturing diseases like they're doing today. And so it came out of nowhere, killed tens of millions of them. But even in the midst of that, it was the Moors that brought in knowledge. If you see the movie Robin Hood, which had Jamie Foxx in it as well, it's showing you, it's a very good movie. If you haven't seen it or you go back and watch it, the movie is showing you snippets of the wickedness of the church, of Catholicism in particular, Christianity, Catholicism in particular, and how it's subjugating the people and abusing the people to go to have a war with the black men Muslims. So there was no appreciation for all of the civilization, the knowledge and understanding and mathematics and agriculture and everything that they brought into Europe coming through Spain. They didn't care because this is a battle between good and evil. That's the point that I'm trying to point out to you in actual history. And the labels that they use, these are not the labels that I create. These are the labels that they use. There is Christianity versus Islam. The question is who's good and who's bad. Well, we know that we know the serious history of Christianity since 1492 for sure. All right. And so somebody had a quote that I pulled out. It said, who knew that the black Moors civilized and ruled Europe for over 1,000 years, and the Catholic Christian monarchs didn't like this, so they waged many wars on us that lasted for a long time, known today as the Christian Crusade Wars. The point of that, there's some questionable things about that, but they did do crusades, but some of those crusades also were involved in getting the people of Europe to come under the rule of Catholicism, under the popes, right? So that was also part of the crusades where they were just killing and maiming white people. And then with the Moors, it created a whole nother crusade effect as well also. And so there's a holy war that took place. There's a holy war that took place with them. And again, I'm pointing out to you that Christopher Columbus, History Meets Prophecy, why it's love is because it's about Christianity freeing itself from Muslim control, from righteous control, from God's control, if you will. And so it talks about here in this holy war in the high Middle Ages, the fight against the Moors, the black man in the Iberian Peninsula. And the Iberian Peninsula is what you see as Spain and Portugal. That whole section is Iberian Peninsula because that was the escape route out of Europe, right? Where you didn't have to go through Asia and India, all right? And so they were controlling that. And so the fight against the Moors in the Iberian Peninsula became linked to the fight for the whole of Christendom. The Reconquista was originally a mere war of conquest. It only later underwent a significant shift in meaning toward a religious, justified war of liberation. Doesn't matter when the shift happened. That is really fundamentally what it was about from beginning to end. The papacy, which is the Pope, and the Abbey of Cluny, which is another Christian sect from the Vikings, the Franks, not only justified the acts of war, but actively encouraged Christian knights to seek armed confrontation with the black infidels, the Moorish infidels, instead of with each other. This war of good and evil has been ongoing. This war of black and white has been ongoing, ladies and gentlemen. Christopher Columbus is loved because of his role in freeing them up. This is what the man is talking about. He's like, the haters are missing the point of Christopher Columbus. This is what he's really talking about because he was kind of the light, or he's the representation or the symbol of them getting freed from that 1,000-year bondage. And so you see here on these maps where the Muslims were in control and how they sealed them up, as it states in the prophecy in Revelations 20, that the Moors, they came up out of Africa into Spain, had them sealed up into what is France and the upper part of Spain. They couldn't go nowhere. They couldn't do nothing, very little. They couldn't get down into this resource. They couldn't get down into heaven, into Africa, get the resources and trade. Okay. They were barbarians all up in here until civilization came with the Moors. And I guess the Moors, the black men were like, well, we got to be here. We got to keep them contained, but we can't live like them. And so they brought in civilization and began to change things. But they were very tolerant of the people as long as you wasn't engaged in unrighteousness. You wasn't trying to have evil reign, which is under the title of Christianity. And I want to make it clear, ladies and gentlemen, I am not talking about the true teachings of Isa, known as Jesus. I'm talking about the Christianity, Christendom, the ideology and doctrine of Christianity that has been passed down through Catholicism. We know of that wickedness, and we'll be talking about that. Let's go on. So this holy war of Grenada is very significant, and the timing of it is very significant because few events figure more dramatically in Spain, if not Europe, but more dramatically in Spain's past than the conquest of Grenada. No other year is more prominent than 1492. Not only did the Reconquista finally end, but fortuitous coincidence, the discovery of America in the same year marked the birth of the Spanish Empire. And so why did they had, you see here in the map, they had really pretty much taken over Spain. It was just this little corner. But why did they have to get Grenada out? Because the kingdom represented a different religion. They didn't want to have nothing to do with Islam. They didn't want to have nothing to do with this black man having any type of rulership. And even when they took over and they made promises to Islam, they eventually ran them all out. And when the Muslims in 1453 had taken over Constantinople, the Christian Byzantine, which is over there in Africa, you can't see on this map, it just rekindled the fire. And so this, ladies and gentlemen, when I'm pointing to you now, history meeting prophecy, we have here shown to you where Satan, devil man, was bound up, all right, for 1,000 years, how he was bound up, how he was sealed, who sealed him, okay, and that they were engaged in a battle as far as both sides were concerned, good versus evil. Let's move on to phase 2. Phase 2, Satan, devil, man is freed to deceive and prepare for final war. And so Revelation 20, verse 7 starts out and says, now when the 1,000 years have expired, Satan will be released from his prison and will go out to deceive the nations which are in the four corners of the earth. Gog and Magog. Now, Gog and Magog is not the four corners of the earth. That's separate. Doesn't quite read, but it's separate. Gog and Magog, you really talking about Europe, Northern Europe, Russia, getting all up in there, not the Spain and Italian area, but into the Northern Europe. But then the point here is that Satan is freed to go out and to deceive and gather them to battle. And that's exactly what has happened. That's exactly what has happened. The Nation of Islam, Elijah Muhammad, had this perfect picture of the Satan serpent deceiving the entire world. As you see here, you couldn't paint a better picture of what has happened. And this deception happened under Christianity. Not the true teachings of Jesus, under the doctrine of Christianity, fashioned together by the Pope, which actually started with the Council of Nicaea, where they merged paganism. Again, there was deception before, remember? So they merged paganism with the teachings of truth, just, and right, okay, and began to formulate what is now called Christianity. Okay, and so in the year 1492 was a very important year because it signaled that the Caucasian, European, Greco-Roman, Judeo-Christianity, Catholicism was free. That's like my full title for it, right? Okay, and Judeo-Christian, you need to know that this Judaism is tied to Christianity because it was what they call Jews who broke away and became supposedly followers of Jesus and created Christianity. It's the same people. And then the Greco-Roman merge was the paganism merging with the Judaism and the Christianity. It's the same. It's all the same group of people. It's all the same representation of devil and Satan in a man. And so Christopher Columbus, we got to talk about the spirit of Christopher Columbus because this really brings to light the fact that he was on a special mission. Why Christopher Columbus is loved? Columbus believed that he was specially chosen by God to bring the gospel to a people who were living in darkness and the shadow of death. He believed his given name, Christopher, signified the mission he was destined to carry out. Just as Saint Christopher bore Christ over the waters, so too was he to bear the light of the gospel over the vast ocean. And now, I know some of y'all may be thinking like I'm thinking. It's kind of funny that you come out of the dark ages, as they call it, the medieval ages, as they call it. You were uncivilized. You had used crusades to kill and maim people, right? And you're going to go and to people living in darkness, in the shadow of death? Seems like you were already there. But nonetheless, this man is a representation of a divine spirit, okay, that he considered to be God. He was extremely zealous for the honor and glory of God. He deeply yearned for the evangelization of these people and for the planting and flourishing everywhere of people's faith in Jesus Christ. In other words, we're going out and converting these people, bringing them under the subjugation of Catholicism, Christianity, of the Pope, of Rome, of those teachings. And that's exactly what was done. That's exactly the deception that was done. We know it's deception now. We didn't know it then because a lot of truth has come to light about Christianity and so forth. We know that. The point is, it's very clear with information we have now, and to understand that he, even if he didn't know it, was a wolf in sheep's clothing. That Christianity, as they had fashioned it, again, not the true teachings of Jesus, or Isa, is a wolf in sheep's clothing that has deceived people. And that deception could have been no more clear than the recent escalation plethora of all of these popes and bishops that are involved in the abuse of young boys, and even the nuns were involved in it. This has been going on for a long time, and the Pope, you can't, it's just logical that it goes up to the Pope. Because there's not a man that I know, a young man that I know that's fertile, that is desirous, with drive and zeal, that don't want to have sexual relations. And so they can't get married. It became a norm to do it with boys. It was probably a norm from the beginning. You go to Greece and you see all of this type of stuff happening. So 1492, the global tyranny begins. The same used in subduing Europeans under the control of Caucasian Christianity, Catholicism, the Christian Catholic Inquisition Crusades. But understand that 1492 is a new year. 1492 is the year that they were free. 1492 is a new beginning. Okay? So the prophecy begins to occur of Satan being freed after 1,000 years for a little while. How long is a little while? Until truth comes. 1930s. But that's the subject for a little bit another time. Okay? We see, again, I was talking about Christopher Columbus being a wolf in sheep's clothing. He says, "And your highness," this is one of his quotes, "as Catholic Christians and princes devoted to the holy Christian faith and the propagation thereof, and enemies of the sect of Muhammad and of all idolatries and heresies, resolve to send me." He was on a mission to subdue any and everybody that wouldn't submit to this new Christianity that they had put together. And this could be no more clear than what has happened to the indigenous people, the Native American, that were already here. He said the Indians are so naive and so free with their possessions that no one who has not witnessed them would believe it. When you ask for something, they never say no. To the contrary, they offer to share with anyone. Now he's coming from scarcity in Europe. He's like, this is wild, right? They would make fine servants. That doesn't sound quite Jesus-like. With 50 men, we could subjugate them all and make them do whatever we want. Really? And some may be sitting here and trying to say that Christianity is right, is a representation of right and true. Again, not that Christianity that is descended down from Catholicism. Even if you Protestant, I know some Protestants and other people say, I'm not Catholic and all that. You're still part of the same vein. The same doctrine is still fundamentally there. Okay, so you're no different in truth. Right? The doctrine is still the same. And so you can see the connection now why the Pope is still considered like this high VP by all of these Christian nations, white Caucasian Christian nations, even though he's not the Pope of any country. Why is this guy, why is the Pope so important? Who is he? What does he represent? He is the representation of the head that gathered them together in Europe, and then as they went out into global domination. This is why Christopher Columbus is loved. He will never, ever go anywhere in the hearts and minds, especially of the white America. Will never, ever go anywhere in the heart and minds of them. And that's what he talked about in that article, because he is the representation of them getting free. But it was tyranny that came with Christianity. If there's any question about the wickedness of this doctrine of Christianity, we know it from enslavement, but it was evident from the beginning. It was that Spanish conquest that occurred. Europeans used deception to commit genocide against the indigenous people and to take control of the land. So the Spanish conquest of Americas. And this is why when you go into Central and South America, the people, masses of the main languages spoken are Spanish and Portuguese. Because out of the Iberian Peninsula is Spain and Portuguese. Right? But did you know that the biggest deception they used to wipe out the Native American was not using guns and weapons? It was the blanket of smallpox. That the blanket of smallpox killed 80 to 100 million, they say, of the Native American tribes. Wiped them all nearly out. How did they know that that would work? Because they had just suffered it themselves with a third of their population, 20 to 30 million, 40 million, who died from the Black Plague. They knew the power of it. They knew how massively it could spread and how widespread the killing would be without them having to use their own physical bodies or weaponry. They had a weapon. And so today, a lot of us will sit up here, especially black men. You should know the history of the Tuskegee experiment. We sit up here and trust the medical system that they put together. Again, we're living in a time of deception. We're trusting their food. We're trusting their ways. Living in a time of deception. We want to get vaccines. We want to get flu shots because we're trusting their deception. We got to move away from that. Last but not least in that tyranny, as I've alluded to, is the deception of Christianity religion. They came in the name of Isa with the aim to establish wicked global domination. You should be aware of the Holy Bible, which Satan, this is so funny sometimes because they'll tell you to your face. But I guess, as they say, you put the knowledge in the book and they taught us not to read and focus on that. So they tell you to your face that, this is a Holy Bible and we translated it out of the original tongue. We diligently compared it to the original tongue and then we revised it. You don't ask what the original tongue is and you don't ask what was revised. Well, you think the original tongue is Hebrew because they told you that. We dealing in deception. And in my last video 6 months ago where I talked about should we be called Hebrew Israelites, there's a section in there that I took their information and the actual facts. And it showed you that they say and they acknowledge that Hebrew is not a true language, that Hebrew is a concocted language. Of course, they don't use that terminology, but that it is derived, that it is basically a stylistic change of the font of Aramaic to Hebrew. It's not even a real deal. So the original tongue that they're referring to is Aramaic. And they revised it to deceive people. They say that the oldest version of the Bible is the Sinai Bible in the British Museum, and that there's been 14,800 differences between this Bible and the standard King James Version. But there's truth in here. We just got to be able to dissect it, figure out what it is, and thanks to the teaching of Elijah Muhammad and Master Farah Muhammad, Allah coming in the person of God, we've been able to figure out some of that. And those of us who come up in oneness will be able to grow in our own respective knowledge and truth and revelations and begin to see what the actual truth is. First, you got to know what the lie is. Then you move towards understanding and knowing what the truth is. Let's move into phase 3. Phase 3, Satan, devil, man is destroyed by God from the sky in the final battle. Revelations 28, verse 8 starts out, and we go out and we'll go out, talking about Satan, we'll go out and deceive the nations, to gather them together to battle. So it says here that they went up on the breadth of the earth and surrounded the camp of the saints in the beloved city, and fire came down from God out of heaven and devoured them. So when you do studies of the Bible, they like to say that, well, this is talking about armies are going to gather around Israel, and that's going to be the final battle. And that's when, again, dealing in deception from them. If you look at this, you can really see the truth in it, that there's no way possible that it could be the Israel that they made up, because there's nowhere in the actual facts of history is there any solid, clear, convincing evidence that Israel even existed. And we know that the modern Israel was something that the Zionists put together themselves, right? That's just actual facts of history. Like, it doesn't exist, right? But even if they said it's Israel, the problem is it says that they went up on the breadth of the earth and surrounded the camp of the saints. What saints are in Israel? The Zionists are the saints? The Zionists that are at war with the Muslim Palestinians. Okay, again, the Islam versus Judeo-Christianity. Okay, because the U.S. is tied into that, right? So is that the camp of the saints? I don't think so. Okay. But more importantly, it says he went up on the breadth of the earth, where the earth is round or oblong. And so breadth means you go to the length of it. How do you go to the length unless you start in the middle, right? So we're not starting in the middle. They're on the outside of the earth. So in order to go to the breadth of the earth, it means that you have to go up into the sky, right? You have to go up into the sky, into the orbiting force and power that keeps the earth in its orbit. And ladies and gentlemen, that's exactly what they have done. Are you familiar with the International Space Station that goes around the orbit of the earth? I think every 90 minutes or something. But did you know that it was 16 nations that came together that are involved with the space station? And what did the Revelation say? We're talking about history meeting prophecy, the battle of good versus evil. And it said that they went forth and gathered the nations for war. Let's go back. It said to gather them together to battle. The International Space Station, 16 countries involved: Belgium, Netherlands, Brazil, Norway, Canada, Russia, Denmark, Spain, France, Sweden, Germany, Switzerland, Italy, United Kingdom, Japan, and of course the United States. Who are you battling then? Africa? Were you over there colonizing, controlling that? Who are you battling? Oh, you're looking for the space beings, the UFOs. You're preparing for the battle in the sky. They finally, under Trump, admitted formally there are UFOs. They admitted that we have been involved, the Pentagon has been involved in a secret mission investigating UFOs. How long has it been going on? Dr. Wesley, in his book, the revised edition of the Book of God, documented how since the 1947s, they have been, since 1947, they've been aware of these UFOs, have been documented, following them, fighting and battling with them, dying, fighting them, etc. Documented all of that. You should pick up the Book of God for a lot of reasons, to learn the truth and document the history of God. But he really broke that down, that this battle in the sky is something serious and it's something they've been involved with. And now you see where history meets prophecy, because they have come together, put together a space station. Then Trump comes out and says, we've got to have a space force. Now, he doesn't invent anything on his own. So now was the time that they felt that they could publicly say the Space Force, publicly acknowledge the UFOs, so that they can begin to pull money in for these things. Okay. As AI is ready. And so National Enquirer, with all their beautiful flamboyantness, came out with a beautiful cover and talked about top secret weapon systems. Top secret weapon systems against who? Can't be against each other, because the 16 of them are all involved. Life on Mars. We need somewhere to go. We think the Earth is going to be gone, or at least America, right? We need somewhere to go. Maybe we can get on Mars. Let's go out to Orion. Let's see what's in these other constellations. And then the artificial intelligent robots. You remember the movie I, Robot. You remember the movie Minority Report. Robots on the street. Computerized systems. Yeah, but ladies and gentlemen, can I share something with you? You're going to have these robots and so forth on the street, but the main purpose for them is to be an army in battling what they call the UFOs. They call it UFOs. History called it the wheel. Elijah Muhammad, people thought he was out of his mind. People thought he didn't know what he was talking about when he revealed what Master Farad Muhammad, Allah, who came in the person of Master Farad Muhammad, revealed to him. Elijah Muhammad had like a third grade education. He didn't know nothing but what Allah taught him in the person of Master Farad Muhammad. And we see now every day that his teachings and the truism of them are they're not being speculated anymore. They're not guesses. They're not some blind faith. They're actually documented. And I'm documenting some right here for you. The truism of what he taught. And so he stated in an article that was in the final call, or which was actually from the message to the black man. Today he has left, talking about the white man, he has left the surface for the sky to destroy his enemies by dropping and exploding bombs on each other. All this was well known in the days of Ezekiel. God revealed it to him that through Ezekiel we might know what to expect at the end of this world. That's what I'm trying to get across to you, ladies and gentlemen, that Christopher Columbus and the history meets prophecy, that we are at the back end of that we're in phase 3. Today we see the white race preparing for the sky in the battle, Elijah says, to determine who shall remain and rule this earth, black or white. Black or white is representation of Islam versus Christianity. Black or white is representation of righteous versus unrighteous. Okay? Because again, Elijah said, he said that some white people will be saved. It ain't for you to try to figure out which one, like the one you dating, the one you in love with, whether it's your parent, all of that situation. I know it's touchy. It may be hurtful, but we dealing with truth, and God, you can't bring your feelings to a factual discussion. Okay. He goes on and states here, throughout the Bible and Holy Quran teachings on the judgment and destruction of the enemies, fire will be used as the last weapon. We just showed you that verse in Revelations that talked about fire being used in the final battle. The earth's greatest arms are fire and water. The whole of its atmosphere is made up of fire and water and gases. Ladies and gentlemen, the UFOs are real. The final battle to come is near, is real. They have been preparing for it. Ladies and gentlemen, the question really becomes, what do you do in preparation? You have to understand the deception that exists in all areas of our lives and activity that was really handed down from the doctrine of the Christianity they fashioned, using the name of Isa to be able to get through to you, because you have to mix truth with falsehood to get to the people. You have to come as a sheep in wolf clothing. You can't just show up as a wolf. You can't just show up as Satan. That is what's been done. Okay? They even perverted Islam. This is actual facts. Sorry, some of the other Muslims that are out there, but the history is that the Aryan Persians, you know them as Iranians, okay, because Iranians don't consider themselves Arabs at all, okay, that they came in and changed some of the scholarship of Islam that was taught by Prophet Muhammad. So they perverted it. They gave you a spook God in that change. Okay. They gave you some of the missed ways that they treat women. You even got some of these so-called Muslims that'll sleep with other boys and men. That's not true Islam. This I call it Arabism Islam. Okay. So don't be confused about that. And when they say, well, Elijah Muhammad doesn't teach true Islam, no, what they got over there isn't the truth. Some people think that the white man's going to live forever, that his reign is going to be forever. That's not supported in history of fallen nations after fallen nations. Okay. And it's not supported in the prophecy, as we just showed. And they're preparing for the battle. You don't know nothing about the space station. You don't know nothing about what they're really doing out there. You didn't know all of the details of these UFOs. They told you it was spooky men. Do you know, as Wesley Muhammad documented, that they have literally seen black men on and from these UFOs? Not some crazy being like they have you thinking in your mind. Black men on these UFOs. Black Moors, if we will, because Moor means, or not black Moors, but Moors, because Moor means black. The battle between black and white. So what do we need to do, ladies and gentlemen? We've got to get our act together. As I like to say, be righteous, discipline up, eat to live. It talks to us and says, and some truth is in the Bible, therefore come out from among them and be separated, says the Lord. 2 Corinthians 6:18. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, come out of her, my people, lest you share in her sins, unless you receive of her plagues, for her sins have reached to heaven, the breadth of the earth. Okay. And God has remembered her iniquities. and she'll be destroyed. The unrighteous shall be destroyed. Don't be amongst the unrighteous. Get righteous. Get after truth. Study the teachings of Elijah Muhammad. Study the knowledge, history of yourself. Ladies and gentlemen, it's the time and now that we live in, that we are in that third phase. And it's moving fast because Space Force is here. The acknowledgement of UFOs is here. It's just a matter of time when will be the battle in the sky and who and what will be of you in the time of this judgment and separation of the righteous and unrighteous. Separation doesn't mean that you have to get a separate land. Separation starts by yourself. Right now, we couldn't take the average black person and put them in a separate land because they would bring nothing but the Negroism that has been handed down through Christian doctrine and racism, white supremacy. So you have to start to change yourself. You have to start to discipline yourself up. You have to start to eat better, live better, do better. Not focus on your feelings, but focus on what is right to do. This is how you begin to separate and begin to teach that to your children. This is how you begin to come out of her. This is how you begin to not be a victim of her plagues. This is how you begin to make change, ladies and gentlemen. They love Christopher Columbus because Christopher Columbus is the representation of them being free to go out and deceive the world and see how many of us they could get. They will never let that go. But in the end, Allah, God, Supreme Being, will prevail. Which side will you be on? This is your brother teacher, Ajamu Minka Kafele. I thank you for taking the time to review this video. I hope it has helped you in your education and edification in pursuit of truth, just, and right. As always, I love you if you're righteous. Can't stand you if you ain't. Go forth, be righteous. Until the next time, talk to you soon.